So we're holding chapter 5 here in the Maimer Basi Legani from Tafshin Yotes from 1959. Just want to recap, summarize what we said in chapters 3 and 4. Okay, so obviously, as we mentioned in the past, this Maimer is based on chapter 9 of the Frierdiker Rebbe's Hemshech Basi Legani from 1950. And in that chapter, in chapter 9, after the Frierdiker Rebbe spends the previous several chapters talking about the Mishkan and talking about the Krashim and even the composition of the word Keresh, which are the walls of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle. So then in chapter 9 he says that the Krashim are like mitzvahs. And then he says that what's the similarity? That mitzvahs are mamshichim or mechabrim. That mitzvahs draw and connect above and below. And the same is true with Krashim, the walls, the pillars, they connect the floor and the roof, right? So but when he says it about the Krashim, he says that they connect. He doesn't say that they're mamshichim, he doesn't say that they draw anything down from above, he just says that they connect it. So the Rebbe notes these two differences and wants to understand why is it, first of all, what's the difference between mitzvahs and Krashim that the Frierdiker Rebbe says mitzvahs are only, that the Krashim are al derech, the mitzvahs are only like the mitzvahs, but meaning that they're not exactly saying there's a difference. What's the difference? And number two, when we see that the difference actually is, he articulates it later when he says that by mitzvah he says mechabrim, that they connect, and the krashim are not, he doesn't say that they connect, they're mechabrim. So the Rebbe goes on to give two introductions. He quotes from the Alter Rebbe from Tanya. The Alter Rebbe says in Igeres HaKodesh that mitzvahs are like pillars. That pillars are rooted in the ground and they reach up above, they connect to the ceiling. And mitzvahs, the same thing. Mitzvahs are pillars that are up above and they reach down below. So the Rebbe asks, what's the difference? The mitzvahs, you're saying that the yesod, the foundation, is above and they come down. But in pillars down here, they come from below to above. What's the difference? Which actually already, before we move on, what emerges from it, and especially with the way the Rebbe is going to explain it afterwards, is that we're now talking about three things here. From the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimer, we have Krashim and mitzvahs. From the Alter Rebbe, we have mitzvahs and we have amudim, pillars. Now, the Frierdiker Rebbe says the Krashim are the amudim, whatever, but still, they're two. So you have mitzvahs, and then you have pillars that are down here that are rooted below that go above, and you have the Krashim. So you have three things. So the Rebbe is going to go on to explain, in chapter 3, the Rebbe explains that the difference between why is it that down here in this world, if in heaven, the foundation is above and everything that comes down extends beneath it, so why here is it in reverse? He says, because down here, since our world is a yesh, hanivra is an existence that feels independent of any source, right, which is unique to our world. Our experience is different than all of all of Seder Shalshus. All of creation feels connected to what it comes from. It feels connected to its source. The only exception is our world, where we feel independent. We don't feel our source. Why do we have that feeling? So he says that feeling can only come from something that truly doesn't have a source. So at the Yesh HaNivra, in the Yesh HaNivra, you have the Yesh HaAmiti. That the true existence, which is Hashem in his essence, the essence of Hashem, that is what creates the Yesh HaNivra, the existence that feels, the created existence. And since the created existence comes from that, so therefore it has that feeling, because it's getting it from the Yesh HaAmiti. The Rebbe says this is the meaning of notes Tchilasan B'Seifan, that the beginning is rooted in the end. Right, that the beginning, Tchila, the higher than Rashis, meaning higher than all of creation, but Tchila, the one that is a primary existence, which is the essence of Hashem, that is embedded and rooted in the final step, which is the Yesh HaNivra. Okay. Then in chapter 4, the Rebbe says, what about Giluyim? So when we were learning it, we discussed the difference between in the two aspects of creation, where Hashem creates the physical world, yesh me'ayin, something from nothing. But Hashem also creates the world, it's a seder shtalshlus, it's a chain of emanation that goes from one level to the next level. Each level, just as a chain, the link, the subsequent link is linked to the link that comes before it. So the same is true with creation, that Hashem creates everything in a manner of ilah va'ol, or seder shtalshlus, in a way of cause and effect, in a way that one thing links to the next. So in that model of creation, which particularly refers to the spiritual realms, to all of the spiritual realms, all the spiritual worlds and all the spiritual realms. All of those things are created in that fashion where there's, as you keep moving on, you get less and less of the light that was available in the previous step. So there, and we'll call that the general term for that is Giluyim, revelations, because we're talking about taking something that's hidden and revealing it. And you reveal it to the next level, and lower level, and lower level. And the lower the level, the more dim it gets. So the Rebbe says, I can understand, in chapter 3 we said that where do we feel the essence of Hashem can be found in the physical world, but in the spiritual realms, in that model, seemingly you should be able to get, the higher you are, the closer you get to the source, to the essence. So if everything comes from the essence of Hashem, so it would seem then that the higher you go, the closer you get to the essence. And yet the Rebbe says it's not the case. That even in that model, even though true, the higher you get, the more light you get, the higher you get. And that's, by the way, so the Rebbe says, why are they called the higher worlds? Because they're higher. And as we've explained in the past, what's higher mean? Higher means more in tune with its source, closer, more of a feeling of its source. So if the Olam Esel are called Olam Esel, they're called higher worlds, there's a reason. What's the meaning that they're higher? Meaning that they're closer to their source. So if that's the case, then it should follow that the higher worlds should be closer also even to the essence of Hashem. And the Rebbe says no. And the Rebbe introduces another phrase. So we had notes, Tchilas and B'Seifon, which explain the idea of Yesh Me'ayin. Then he says, there's Kol HaGavoya, Gavoya Yoser Yered Lamata Mata B'Yoser. That the higher something is, the lower it comes. And the term is Hagavoya Gavoya. There's like a double expression. Gavoya means really high. Or not really high, but the highest. So it's not just Gavoya, something that's high comes down, but the highest, Gavoya, is Lamata Mata, to the lowest level. And again, our world, that's the lowest level. How does that work? So he brings three metaphors from the Mittel Rebbe. The Mittel Rebbe says that there's one example of how something higher is found, specifically something lower, is with the mashal of light. He says that light, how do you express, or where do you see the great intensity of a light, specifically in the farthest reaches of that light? That the farther it reaches, the more you see it. So even though when you're talking about light, the light itself, where is it brighter? It's brighter closer to the source. It's dimmer at the end. But the true essence of the light is expressed where even at its dimmest point, at its furthest point. That's where you see how strong that light is. That's one. Another example he gives is of a barrel filled with water. And he says the same thing is true with wisdom, a person that's a scholar that's full of wisdom, that where do you see how full the barrel is, specifically when the water that spills out of it. Since the barrel is so full, there's water that's spilling out. So the water that's spilling out is insignificant. It spills out and you don't even care about it. And yet, it's that water that expresses how full the barrel really is. And the same is true with a sage, with a scholar. In his, offhand, off-the-cuff remarks, you could see the depth of his knowledge, of his wisdom. You see how smart he really is when he's saying something that's, in casual conversation. And then he says, there's also the idea of having a child, that starts as a seed, and where do you see it? Where do you see that capacity to be able to create something new, specifically as it separates from the individual, the original person, and now becomes something new? When you see a walking person that's totally independent, separate of you, that's where your power to give birth, that's where it's expressed. Right? And something completely, as its furthest point from you. Okay. So as another person starts within yourself, it starts in your mind. Right? As a thought, as an idea. And then it comes out, but where do you see that capacity, specifically when it's completely outside and separate? Okay? The Rebbe says these three examples, I think last year's Maimer, Basi Legani Lamed Ches, the Rebbe mentions these three Mishalim of the Mittel Rebbe, and he says if he gives three, obviously each one adds another layer that is not there in the first one. So here in this Maimer, the Rebbe explains it, and he says, when we're talking about Giluyim, you're talking about Hishtalshalos, we talked about before, right? So you have every stage every level has three components to it, three parts. We're talking about Giluy, revealing something that's hidden, right? That's what Hishtalshalos is all about, revealing something from a higher plane, revealing it in a lower place. So when we do that, you have three stages to it. You have the thing as it is within itself, in its essence. Then you have as now it prepares, so to speak, to go down to the next level, and then as it goes into the next level, right? Or an example given of wisdom, an idea that you have the capacity to think, right? There, all of the intellect is completely concealed. It's a capacity to think. Then you have chachma, which is the seed of an idea, right? That seed of an idea is not a fully developed idea, but already the idea is starting to take shape. And then you have, as it comes into bina, as it's fully developed, right? Or going with another model, when you want to teach somebody. So you have the ideas, the thoughts as they are in your own mind. As they are in your own mind, if you're a very big scholar, so the thoughts are on the most intense and deepest levels. Then you want to start teaching, you have to prepare a class, so you need to start thinking about the capacity of your students. So now already the thought, the ideas as they are in their intense state in your own mind, as they are so abstract and deep, now they have to start taking on another shape, and you need to start limiting them in order to prepare them to transmit it to somebody else. Then you have the actual transmission, where now the thoughts are shared with somebody else. And when you speak them, you articulate them, they're limited even more than as they are in your mind when you're preparing the class, right? So these three stages are three components of every revelation, from something higher to lower. And that's what it explains in Kabbalah, and Chassidus talks about a lot, three levels that are called Oir, Mayim, and Rakia. Oir is light, Mayim is water, Rakia is the sky. And these three things represent these three stages. So Oir, light, is abstract. It's not tangible, it's not definable, it's completely abstract. Water, Mayim, is the next stage where it already takes on some kind of form, but water is colorless and water is formless, has no shape. And so that represents already it's already a step down. It takes on more of a form than relative to light, but it's still not the full form. And then you have sky, as the sky is called a glidumaya. It's like sort of the frozen water. It takes on a shape and a form and a color. Sky is its hue and its shape. So these three examples given by the Mittler Rebbe correspond to these three levels. The idea of light corresponds to that component of light. The idea of the water, the barrel full of water, corresponds to that level of mayim, that second stage. And the idea of the seed giving birth, creating something completely new, a completely new separate entity, that represents rakia. What's that have to do with what we're saying here? Because the Rebbe wants to bring out a point. And he explains, the point the Rebbe wants to bring out in chapter 4 is that even when we're talking about revealing something, even when we're talking about the level of Giluyim, the ultimate depth of the highest level is only revealed in the lowest place. So even though in Giluyim you would say, the higher you are, the more light, the closer you are to the source. And yet we find, paradoxically, the opposite is true. That the true depth of something can be found specifically in the lowest place. So you might say, without the three Mishalim of the Mittler Rebbe, without the whole the Rebbe introducing this idea of Oir, Mayim, Rakia, true, where does that happen? When we're talking about the lowest level. But when we're talking about Mayim, that level of Mayim, or when we're talking about Oir, we're there, it's not about revealing to anything else. Oir, that level, that stage of the light as it is within itself, in a world itself, totally irrespective of anything beneath it, so there, the higher you are, the closer you get to the source. And the Rebbe says, no, even on that level. So in other words, in the entire genetic makeup of Seder Ishtalshalos, in every step of it and every component of it, each component of it reveals this idea that the highest can be found in the lowest. That where do you see the true depth of something? How do you reach the Gavoya Gavoya? The ultimate source of everything is specifically in the Mata Mata B'Yoser. And where's the Mata Mata B'Yoser? Okay, so it's relative. The lower the Ur comes, that's how you see how great it is. But really, even that is not finished. It's not fully satisfied. You can't really get the true depth of the source of the Ur until you get to the end of the Rakia. When you look at it all in its entirety, so yeah, you can look at it, each thing isolated in its own. But when you look at it in its entirety, where do you get the Gavoya B'Yoser, the highest of high? That's specifically in the Mata Mata B'Yoser. Where's the Mata Mata B'Yoser? Is our world. And so the Rebbe says that, so we see the same idea, that even from the perspective of Giluyim, even from that vantage point, the main thing is down here in this world. And that's why the pillars, the beams, are rooted in the ground. And the Rebbe mentioned another point towards the end of the chapter here, that when you want to build a building, so when you're going to lay the foundation, it has to be laid in hard ground, in firm ground. In other words, even though there's, when we talk about our world, we have Asiya Haruchni, you have Asiya Gashmi, you have the spiritual realm of our physical world, and you have the physical. So when we're talking about the lowest, where do we mean? We mean our world in general. But specifically, where do we mean? In the physical arena in our world. In the Karka Kasha, in the hard earth. Right? Because if you're going to try and build a building and you're going to build in quicksand, you're not going to be able to build very much. Right? So it has to be built in firm ground, in hard ground, meaning in the lowest, coarsest part of our world, which is Asiya Gashmis, the physical world. And this is the meaning of the Zohar, Asiya La'ela, that the highest level is the actual act. The action itself is the highest level. Okay. Now, after these introductions, now we can understand why the Friedrich Rebbe says that mitzvahs, that the Krashim are like the mitzvahs. And also why the Krashim, he says, are machabrim, they connect, but not mamshichim, they don't draw. That's chapter 5. Okay. Now we can understand what the Friedrich Rebbe says in his Maimer, the Ba'hefresh bein Krashim l'mitzvahs, but the difference between the Krashim, the pillars of the Mishkan, and the mitzvahs. Shakrashim im al derech bilvad mitzvahs. Number one, that the Krashim are only like mitzvahs. And also why by the Krashim he says that they connect, but he doesn't say that they draw. That they draw down the essence, right? Based on what was explained in the previous chapters of the Friedrich Rebbe's Maimer, right? And what the Rebbe explained in previous years was he's addressing those chapters. The Friedrich Rebbe in his Maimer in the previous chapters talks about, already starting from chapter 2, where he starts talking about the Avodas, the Mishkan, and the Avodah in the Mishkan, and he talks about the idea of what that means. What is the service in the temple and in the tabernacle? How does that relate to us today, right? So he explains that what's Krashim? The service of Krashim is the spiritual service of man. As he explains, as the Friedrich Rebbe explains in his Maimer right in chapter 2 about sacrifices. What is the service of sacrifices for us? That a person is obligated. What's the service of sacrifices? Is that a person has a fire. There's the heavenly, the higher fire. There's the lower fire, as he explains at length in his Maimer. And the idea is that a person has to work with both of them. So there's the fire, there are the passions of the neshama. Then there are the passions of the animal soul. And a person has to work with these passions, with these loves and desires that he has. And what does he have to do? And he has to then refine his animal soul and all the different aspects of the animal soul. And as explained in the Torah, it talks about karbanis, and the karbanis can be categorized different types of karbanis from different animals. There's the shur, there's the ox, there's the sheep, there's the goat. And so the Friedrich Rebbe explains that represents different types of character traits in a person, different types of animal souls, depending on their intensity and their coarseness, right? But what's the idea? You have to work with all of these components of the animal soul. So, talking about serving Hashem, and what are we saying? Till now we're talking about serving Hashem, meaning refining our character, transforming our character. Even the idea of mahapech, changing the folly, the foolishness of the inappropriate, of the unholy, the sinful, into folly of holiness beyond rationale. What are we talking about? We're talking about a perception. We're talking about a perspective and a motivation in serving Hashem. That is... What kind of service is that? So yeah, you're working on yourself, you're transforming your own desires, your own character, but that's already relative to what we're going to say in a moment. That's a spiritual type of service. It's not actual physical activity. Which we say about physical actions, as we quoted from the Zohar, that the action, the physical act is the highest. So this is not the firm ground that we're talking about. Before we said there's the softer earth and there is the more a firm earth, right? The more dense earth. So when we're talking about a person, a person is mata, a person is karka. Yeah, it's earth. We're talking about your nefesh bahamis. You're talking about unholiness. We're talking about a very low level, and yet, relative to physical activity, it's still considered spiritual. It's karka, but it's not the firmest of earth. It's not the lowest. And when we say that the highest thing is the physical act, what are we talking about? The act, not that working with your own physical self. I have my personality. A person has his, their emotional state and even their mental. That's already more spiritual. It's not the physical. The chaymer of the nefesh bahamis. It's chaymer. It's chumrius. Yeah. It's materialistic. It's physical, but it's not the lowest. The lowest is in the action, in the level of action. So the Frierdiker Rebbe is talking about the idea of karbanis, specifically as where he explains it clearly, articulates it, is when we're talking about karbanis. But the same is true with regard to the krashim. The Frierdiker Rebbe implies it, and here we're quoting from the Baal Shem Tov, where the Baal Shem Tov actually says this clearly, that the krashim, the idea of keresh, that the pillars represent the spiritual service of man. What does it mean, the spiritual service? We're talking about, from the Frierdiker, we're talking about transforming your own chumrius, your own physical self. And we're saying even that's not the ultimate. But the way the Baal Shem Tov talks about it, it's talking about mamash, a spiritual thing. It's talking about connecting olam es halyonim. What's the idea of keresh? The Baal Shem Tov explains that the idea of keresh for a person is l'chaber u'l'kasher olam es melikus, to combine, to connect the spiritual realms with godliness. That the Zohar says, the Kunei Zohar says, that it says in the pasuk, what was the height of the krashim, of these pillars? Eser amis, right? There are 10 amis, 10 cubits, right? Eser amis eirech hakeresh. So the Zohar says, what's the 10 amis? That represents Dashira Dugufa de Barnash. That represents the height of man. What does it mean, the height of man? The build of man. Man is made up of 10 faculties, right? 3 intellectual and 7 emotional. And so therefore we see this idea of the 10 amas, the 10 cubits of the krashim correspond to the 10 faculties in man, right? So what's the idea? That just as the krashim connect the floor with the ceiling, the same is true with man, that he has to connect. Right? So that's the idea of the krashim, and man's service is to transform the foolishness of this world and that attitude of the unholy, the desires of the unholy, the irrational desires of the animal soul, turning it into beyond rationale in service of Hashem. But this is all emotional, intellectual. It's not physical. And since we're talking about this idea of krashim is a spiritual service of man, you're not able through that to draw this great divine light into the world. Why? This idea of drawing the light down comes from Atzmus, from the essence of Hashem. And as we've said, how do we draw Atzmus? How do you access the essence that can be found specifically in the lowest place? This means observing the mitzvahs in the physical, in their physical state. Therefore, when it comes to mitzvahs, he says mamshichim. So, what the Rebbe is saying here about bringing Ein Sof down through Atzmos, what are we talking about? Obviously, we just said, we quoted from the Baal Shem Tov, this idea of Lakasher Eilamis with Elikos. What does that mean? To connect Eilamis with Elikos. So, it means you're bringing light, right? You're uniting, you see that in the Eilamis they're not separate things. The Eibishter is called by many different names, right, which represent many different functions. Person looking from the outside, you'd say, look, this is one function, this is one mode of godliness, is another. You don't necessarily see the connection. But our job is to show that it's all one thing. It's all one and the same. Right? That the Eibishter, Havaya, Lekim, all these different manifestations are all one and the same. Right? There's the unifying concept of all of them, which is the Eibishter. But still, even having said that, where do you access the essence of Hashem? That's all within Giluyim. Where do you access the essence of Hashem? That could only be through action, through physical action. So that's what he says over here, that Hamshachas Ein Sof is from the of Atzmos. What kind of Ein Sof? Ein Sof, light that brings within it Atzmos. Remember, we mentioned before about Kol Gavoya Yesa Lamata Mata B'Yesa. And everybody notes, what's the double expression? Gavoya, higher, and lower. There's lower, you have the soft earth, which is the spiritual service of man, then you have mata, the lowest, which is in the physical plane. And what's gavoya? There's gavoya, which is Ein Sof, higher, the light from above. But then there's gavoya, higher and higher, meaning essence. So how do you draw light that has within it the gavoya? The essence. That can only come from Atzmos. How do you access Atzmos? That's through the physical action. Yep.
So the krashim is the Avodas Adam?
So krashim is spiritual service.
So it's
working on your character, refining your character. Right. That's why he says Sal Derech. The Rebbe is going to explain it. First he starts with...
Just a question. So how is it that we get credit if we have the intention to do something but we never fulfill it?
It's not the same. It says... It says mitzarfa lamaisa. It says achshava tova Hakadosh Baruch Hu mitzarfa lamaisa. It's mitzarfa, but it's not the same thing. It's still not the same. No, it's not the same. Also, like it says by oinus taka, it says oinus rachmana pater. Somebody who can't is outside of their control. They can't perform a mitzvah, so you're exempt from it, right? You can't be held accountable if you couldn't do it. But kimanda avidan lo yamrinan. But still, it's not considered as if you did it.
I thought if the intention was sincere that you get full credit.
No, even if you intend to do a mitzvah and you can't, for whatever reason, it's not possible for you to have done it, it's out of your control, so what are you going to say? So you intended to do it, and you felt bad about it, and you meditated on it, but still it's not the mitzvah itself. It's not.
That only is as if you had
if you don't want to talk about schar already, you're talking about giluyim. You want to talk if your concern is reward, fine.
I'm not saying you're
on that level, maybe, okay, you'll get schar, but in terms of actually doing what we're talking about here and accessing atzmos, that you don't do. No, doesn't happen. That's only through the action. So why is it that that's only through mitzvahs? So he explains. Because mitzvahs are in the physical. As Friedrich Rebbe explains in many mamarim, we said the krushim is a spiritual service, working on your character, refining your character. What we said, that if I have to put on tefillin, so there's the refinement of my character, let's say, that comes as a result of putting on tefillin. That's a spiritual effect that it has. We talked about in the kavanah of tefillin, right? The idea of subjugating the mind and heart. That's a spiritual component. But then there's the actual act, laying the tefillin on your hand, tying your hand. That's the physical act. But then there are mitzvahs that are only spiritual. The mitzvah to love Hashem. It's a mitzvah to love Hashem. That's a spiritual mitzvah. Mitzvah to fear Hashem. Here's Hashem. There's no physical manifestation or action. That's obviously all and two different mitzvahs. But the point is, and even loving your friend is doing something for him, then there's loving him. Okay, but the point is that that's a feeling. Even knowing Hashem, to know Hashem, right? What's the physical manifestation of that, right? So the Rebbe says that even when we're talking about mitzvahs, every mitzvah, even these seemingly spiritual mitzvahs, in other words, there are mitzvahs, mitzvah has the physical component and the spiritual component that goes with it, right? Fine. So the spiritual component is crushing. But what about the mitzvahs that are only spiritual, don't have a physical component? So the Rebbe says even those mitzvahs actually do have a physical component. What is that? So he says that those mitzvahs that the Friedrich Rebbe explains, that those things are feelings that you have in the mind and in the heart. That when we're talking about awe of Hashem, it has to be to such an extent that you feel sort of a tightness, right? Just like when a person's afraid, your heart beats differently, your stomach, there are knots in the stomach, right? Those are physical feelings. Person, you're trying to understand God, you're coming to know God, you're learning Chassidus, so it's not enough to just sit and think about these things. You have to work on it. And what happens when you think deeply into something? You wrinkle your brow, and you have creases and wrinkles that start to form on your face from exertion in trying to understand something. So that's a physical expression of it. The same is true with regard to the general pleasure that a person is supposed to feel when he's doing a mitzvah, when he's serving Hashem. That the pleasure is supposed to add sort of fat to the person, like the pasuk in Tehillim. It says Shmuel Tevid Dashanat. And we know the story from the Gemara, which is Shmuel Tevid Dashanat, that good news expands the bones. Shamnun is Gashmi, is Basar Gashmi. We're talking about actual fat, that physical expression of this pleasure that a person has in godliness. You know the story from the Gemara about Bechna Zakai, right? That when he came out to see the Roman. When he came to see him, and outside of Israel, outside of Yerushalayim, there was the sea. Then he said he greeted him as the king, and he says, "Now you're right. You need to 5 minutes." He says, "No, you're whatever." Anyway, then he finds out that the Caesar had been killed, and he's now or died, and he's the new Caesar, right? He's the new ruler. Then he couldn't get his shoe off, so they called Rabbi Yechon. Rabbi Yechon said, "Bring somebody who you don't like, let him pass in front of you, and then you'll be able to take it off." And that's what he did. He had an enemy come in front of him, and then he was able to remove his shoe. How did he know this? He said, quoted this pasuk, Shmuel Tev Dashan. When a person has pleasure, so that expands, the person expands from it. So he figured the reverse is also true. If the person has fear or is angry, upset about something, so then it would go back, right? And same we know the story about the Chernobler, right? That he had He was heavy, and it was from the pleasure of, it says Hayim, right? From the pleasure of saying Amen Yehesh Mei Rabba. Okay, so there's a physical expression of, some kind of a physical expression of these mitzvahs as well. Okay. This is now why he says that the kroshim are similar to the mitzvahs, but not that they are. They're not exactly the same. Through kroshim, you can draw taka very high, but not the highest, not the atzmus, not what we said before, right? The eirin seif that comes from atzmus. So when you do a mitzvah, you can draw from something very high. You could be miyachid yichudim elyonim, you could be meisif eiris and connect and be miyachid shem kutchabrichu shchinta. You could do all kinds of incredible things. But to access atzmus, that only happens through mitzvahs. This is then what it means that mitzvahs come from atzmus and they connect Eirin Seif with the worlds. And when a person does a mitzvah, so what happens? First, he connects them with the worlds. That comes from the first step of the mitzvah, which is the spiritual component of the mitzvah. Person does a mitzvah, so this is the spiritual component of the mitzvah, that through a person engaging in it, he connects the Eirin Seif with the worlds. But then through observing the mitzvah in the physical, he connects them with atzmus, with the essence of Hashem. We find it says that David HaMelech was connected Torah with God. What does that mean? What does it mean that David HaMelech connects Torah with HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Torah is the Eibusher's Torah. What does it mean that he connects it? So he's saying the same things with the mitzvahs, that before a person does a mitzvah, the Eibusher has mitzvahs. Their mitzvahs are there before we observe them. And whose mitzvahs are they? They're Hashem's mitzvahs. In fact, before we do a mitzvah, we actually acknowledge Hashem, we praise Hashem, we thank Hashem for sanctifying us with His mitzvahs. What does it mean He sanctifies us with His mitzvahs? His mitzvahs are holy and they sanctify us before we've even done them. But then, that the person takes these mitzvahs though, and he draws them on himself and connects them with the elements. So what happens is a person takes mitzvahs, Hashem is the one who gives us mitzvahs. Hashem commands us a mitzvah, then we go ahead and we observe the mitzvah. So the mere fact that Hashem gives us the mitzvahs and we have the opportunity to approach a mitzvah, that already we're drawing that down. You make a bracha and already you're drawing. Baruch atah is the idea of hamshacha. You're drawing already that light, the mitzvahs from above to below. But when a person fulfills the mitzvah, then what you're doing is you're connecting the lowest with the highest. You're connecting the atzmus with everything in between and the lowest level itself, right? And how do we see that? So, by the way, I mentioned right at the beginning when we were summarizing from before. I mentioned that there are three components. I didn't explain it. Here it becomes clearer. We have the kroshim, we said, which is a spiritual service of Hashem. Then you have mitzvahs, right? The Friedrich Rebbe talks about kroshim and mitzvahs. The Alter Rebbe talks about mitzvahs and pillars that are rooted in the ground. But the Alter Rebbe, when he talks about the mitzvahs, he says mitzvahs that are rooted above. So what are we talking about? So there are three things here. You have mitzvahs, as the Alter Rebbe is talking about, the mitzvahs that are rooted above the Eibusher's mitzvahs. That comes down, that's the spiritual component of mitzvahs. Then you have kroshim, which is the spiritual service of man, to connect from above to below. And then you have the amudim, the pillars. The Alter Rebbe is using the pillars as a mashal to explain the mitzvahs, but the Rebbe understands it to say, no, what does he mean by the pillars? The actual physical act of the mitzvah. That's where we can draw from the highest levels. That's what the Rebbe is saying here. There are mitzvahs that are the Eibusher's mitzvahs. Hashem gives us, it says, the Rebbe says over here, right, quotes the pasuk, we're familiar with, Magid Dvar of Yaakov Chokov Mishpat of Yisrael. The Eibusher, what he himself does, he commands us to do. So what does that mean? On one hand, so the Rebbe Marash talks about this. There are two ways of understanding this. One thing is the Eibusher does mitzvahs, and the mitzvahs that he does, he asks us to do, right? But then there's another understanding of it, which is when we do a mitzvahs, we cause the Eibusher to do mitzvahs. By us doing mitzvahs, Hashem does mitzvahs. So what's causing what? So there are two different things. There's the mitzvahs of Lamaila, the Eibusher's mitzvahs that he gives us, that sanctifies. That's on the spiritual sense. That's the idea of connecting Eilamis, Elyonim, and Eirin Seif, or connecting Kutchabrichu and the Eilamis. And Mechaber, like it says about David, Mechaber Torah and Lamaila with Kutchabrichu, right? But then there is, when a person does a mitzvah, he causes Hashem to do the mitzvah. Or like when a person studies Torah, as a Baruch Hu I learned, Eibusher studies Torah, therefore he commands me to learn Torah. So what is it? So if the Eibusher is learning Torah, what does it mean that when a person, we learn from the Medrash, that a person learns Torah, the Eibusher sits down across him and learns Torah with him? What's the cause, what's the effect? So the point is here, when a person does it, the physical act, that causes the Eibusher to do it. Meaning, that's a higher level already. I'm sorry? I'm sorry? It is both. At two different levels. The Eibusher reacts to what we're doing, so to speak. What he commands us to do, he himself does. What if the Eibusher is putting on film, and then we put on film because he's putting on film, so he commands us to put on film, and we put on film, and then he puts on film. Wait, he was already putting on film. What just happened? He's already putting on film. What's new? What we introduced that's new that wasn't there before? So that's what the Rebbe says here. That now it's not just light. It's not just giluyim. We're talking about bringing from atzmos. That only comes as a result of what we do. So it's a whole new level. And the Rebbe clarifies this point. The Mizitcher Magid interprets this pasuk. The pasuk says, you should keep my statutes, and my laws. The person should do v'chaybam, he should live in them, right? What is that? From here we know about v'chaybam, a person should do mitzvahs that not lose his life doing mitzvahs, right? So the Magid explains like this. You have chukaisai mishpata, right? Chukaisai hu machshava, shu levush miyuchad k'ma esis hachkika. When it says ushmartem es chukaisai chukim, those laws that statutes represent thoughts, because thoughts, machshava is a levush hamiyuchad. It's one with the person. Unlike your other garments that are external, your speech, which is external outside of yourself, action, which is certainly done outside of yourself, thoughts are within yourself, right? So that's within the person. That's like engraving, which is words that are not separate from the page, but words that are engraved in it, right? So chukim represents machshav. Mishpatai hu adibur, k'mishkasad var melech shultan. That mishpatim, these laws represent speech, like it says dvar melech, the word of the king is shultan. That's what rules. Melech b'mishpat yamadaris, and the king establishes the world based on mishpat, on those words that he then governs by. Asher yasa oisam adam. Then you have the third thing, which is yasa oisam adam. A person does. So you have machshava dibur ma'isa. Shmartam chukaisai, that's machshava. It's mishpatai, ve'es mishpatai, that's dibur. Asher yasa oisam adam, that is ma'isa. So when you hasiya shu hatachlis, the ultimate, right? Hasiya leila. V'idei zeh v'chai bahem. And through the person doing, what happens? V'chai bahem. Ta'idei avoida b'machshava mamshuk ma'machshava al yad dibur l'b'chinas ha'ma'isa hina idei zeh v'chai bahem. Shemamshuk chayz ba'mitzvahs. What does it mean v'chai bahem? So the simple meaning of v'chai bahem is a person lives by these mitzvahs. We live by the mitzvahs we do. The Mizitcher Magid explains v'chai bahem, when a person thinks, and then his thinking leads to his speaking, which then leads to action. V'chai bahem, he brings chayas into the mitzvahs. So the mitzvahs, as they are mitzvahs of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem's mitzvahs, they have light, but it's not the gavaya b'yosa, not the high, it's not atzmos, not essence. When a person does them, v'chai bahem, he brings new life and vitality into the mitzvahs themselves. This is what it means that when we say that krashim is the spiritual service of man. Through that, we come to doing it in the physical arena as well, in physical. And through that, we draw atzmos and connect it to the elements. The pillars that then combine the roof and the ceiling and the floor to be one. Literally, Asher by Yeshanivri is Gali Yeshamiti, that in the Yeshanivri we have the Yeshamiti. Do we have a few more minutes or no? We're done? We're out of time? I want to, we'll, the next class, before we continue, the next half of the Maimer, I just want to clarify this point over here. What we're saying here, we just learned, the last Maimer we learned together, right? So what was one of the points of the Maimer the Rebbe said, remember, the Rebbe is trying to say that the three stages of the miracle of Hanukkah, right? The three levels of godliness. There's Yichud Tata, Yichud Ilah, and then there's Havai Delayla. We're not going to get into those details now. But the point is, the Rebbe says that even in the lowest miracle of Hanukkah, which was Yichud Tata, you already have the Havai Delayla. How? How did the Rebbe come to that conclusion? Because he explains, since it caused it. If there are three different functions, then how does one lead to the next? The only way it could lead to the next is if it's really in there. I think what the Rebbe says here in these last words explain why the Rebbe has to go through those two introductions. Why is it necessary? True, we explained in our summary now, the great chiddush over here that we're saying that even Giluyim, you have that it's all about revealing the essence of Hashem. Fine, but why is that necessary here in this Maimer? Why do you need to bring that in? Because the Rebbe is explaining that one thing leads to the next. The avodah of the krushim, the spiritual service of man, ultimately is what leads you into the physical action. But where does that happen? It happens only in the physical plane. So how could it be that the avodah ruchnis, that spiritual service in man, should lead you to the action that could then draw the atzmos? It's because even avodah ruchnis, it's all about reaching action. It's all about revealing the essence. But that can only happen in the physical arena, right? So you see how one leads to the next. I think that's anyway. This basically concludes the first half of the Maimer. Mr. Hashem, chapter 6 will continue the next half.